64 games, retro gaming goodness.
Welcome to the Video Games Hall of Justice, where the loving memories of the world's most remembered Amiga games are put on trial and given a chance to prove their worth, once and for all. This is Judge and Jury. All rise, Judge Drokk presiding. In this courtroom we will examine the cult status and time-honoured legacy of some of the Amiga's most revered titles. And with the help of a jury of experts in their field, we'll offer a final verdict as to whether the legacy of the titles on trial are indeed justified. Football is, as you will be aware, a team sport where the aim of the game is kicking a ball into a net to score a goal. It sounds simple enough, but in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Forget the sport itself for a moment. Football is the source of some of the most contentious fan rivalries in any sport. Many fans missing matches while they have a punch-up outside or even inside the ground itself. Thankfully, real-world rivalry doesn't often spill into violence among Amiga football fans when they're discussing their favourite football game. But if it happens today, then this judge will be on hand to keep order amongst the jury. Today's big game is a match between long-time rivals Kick-Off that premiered way back in 1989 and its upstart rival Sensible World of Soccer, which arrived a little later in 1992. Dino Dini's legendary Kick-Off series quickly built up a solid fan base and was almost certainly one of the most played one-on-one games on Amiga. Kick-Off tournaments were a thing of legend, especially at Amiga demo parties, where alcohol could either unlock or unpick the skills needed for the tight, fast gameplay. Sensible Soccer came a little later from those jovial fellows at Sensible Software and immediately found its own fan base while simultaneously winning over a few fans from its rivals. Was Kick-Off now the old man on the pitch looking at best like a 1-1 draw, or does it still have the skills to snatch a win from a 2-1 thriller and get 3 points to boot? Let's find out as our jury lace up their boots and head out onto the pitch like it's 1993 all over again. You are watching the beautiful game. This is Judge and Jury. Now let's meet the defendants.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Macrae, originally from London, England, now residing in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm a massive fan of anything Commodore 64, Amiga and arcade gaming related, and I'm also a contributing writer and editor for the ZZAP Amiga magazine from Fusion Retro. I'm also delighted to be discussing classic Amiga games on this channel, which I hold in such high regard.
Hey everybody, Bastish Bia for the 64K YouTube channel. I'm originally from South Africa and now live in Canada, and I'm so glad to be finally making a series about classic Amiga gaming.
Hi, my name is David-Motowylak. I live in the United States and I've been a long-time Amiga fan since I purchased my first Amiga 500 back in 1988.
You may now present your evidence.
For this episode of Judge and Jury, the process was much different for me as I was not very familiar with these two soccer games.
I'm a bit of a football nut myself, which no doubt comes from being brought up in England. Memories of failed World Cups for England never fade, especially the infamous Hand of God incident with Diego Maradona in 1986. Images of my late father jumping up and down, cursing at the TV, are so vivid to this day.
Just like David, I never experienced these games in the original Amiga versions as I played my C64 right up to the bitter end in 1993. I did switch though to 16-bit in 91 with the purchase of my Sega Mega Drive, and that's where I first played a latter version of Sensible on that system, which I really enjoyed.
I was never much of a sports gamer, and when these games came out, my experience with video soccer was more or less limited to a couple games on the C64. International Soccer, a brilliant game released by Commodore, and Microprose Soccer to a lesser extent, which is actually a precursor to the Sensible Soccer series.
Now in the arcades, Tekken's World Cup with its frantic trackball action and Taito's kick and run, they were my favourite football games, especially with two players. And actually comparing these two games is actually quite similar to comparing Kick-Off and Sensible Soccer. One playing a game with just pure action and one graphically superb game with more features and frills. All the games had certain personality, and this definitely came through with Sensible Soccer.
Kick-Off was always a soccer game I knew about, purely from its reputation and adverts in my favourite video game publications, but never actually played it, which gives these versions a fresh perspective perspective from me as well.
Sure, I liked them both, but would have never said I was a die-hard fan. In addition, soccer games were just not as popular here in the United States compared to other countries, especially during the time frame of the late 80s, early 90s. I had to double-check Moby Games to confirm that yes, both games were never officially released here. So other than knowing that these were two very popular games for the Amiga, I came in pretty much fresh this time.
The precursor for Sensible Soccer was Macrae Soccer for the Commodore 64. I remember first seeing that game at what was probably the Commodore show in 1988 in London. I distinctly remember peering through a crowd, watching John Hare and Chris Yates presenting it live. I also recall seeing a match being played with rain, lightning flashing, and of course those action replays. I was just simply aghast at the time. It was way better than anything else on the 64, and I played it to death until I parted with the 64 and purchased an Amiga.
We played our fair share of C64 soccer games, that's for sure. The likes of International and Macrae Soccer, plus Football Manager were often loaded up. In fact, I probably played more manager games in the genre than arcade ones back then, as I really loved the strategy-styled experiences.
Before you analyse Sensible Soccer, you need to understand its roots and the software company that developed it. Sensible Software had Commodore 64 hits already with Parallax and Whizball, and then transferred to the 16-bit computers, first with Megalomania, a strategy game with cute, well-drawn sprites. All the games had certain personality, and this definitely came through with Sensible Soccer.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
I first tried Kickoff as it was the game I was least familiar with. The graphics, while pretty plain, are bold and colorful and do the job just fine.
Kickoff doesn't mess around as a game, it jumps straight in with less options but enough to give the full football experience.
Kickoff almost seemed to be released out of the blue, with no hype whatsoever, unlike Sensible Soccer that is. I remember first playing it on the Atari ST and not thinking much of it initially.
The thing I like the most about this game is the pace. It's fast and smooth and gives the whole experience a chaotic feel, which is hard to grasp in the beginning, but with a little bit of time it becomes second nature.
The player animations, while fairly minimalist, are really well done and the screen scrolls very smoothly.
The graphics are extremely simple, wireframe pitch with raster effect for the turf, small overhead sprites for the players, and just a simple white dot for the ball.
I like the mini-map in the corner. It can help spot the ball when it's off screen, but with my limited experience with the game, I found it difficult to retract my eye from the map to the playfield. I guess with time that could become second nature.
With the view being pretty close to the pitch, having the mini-map in the corner was pretty useful, and in this game's case beneficial to the gameplay and not simply window dressing.
Now what sets Kickoff apart from other football games is the way you control the ball. With most footy games, the ball automatically sticks to your feet and you run around without needing to worry about it. However, with Kickoff, controlling at the ball is a core skill that you must master.
I thought the sound effects were really good, especially the kicks of the ball, but the crowd sounds always seem to blast out of nowhere. It would have been nice to have the sensible crowd singing constantly in the background for atmosphere, but then again, 89 was still early days for soccer games.
The game was initially developed for the Atari ST and then ported to the Amiga, and while that can sometimes be a shortcoming, I don't feel anything was sacrificed here.
There is also more chance for the opposition to intercept or tackle, all of which is realistic and much more in line with how real football is controlled. However, this all proved frustrating for many, and Kickoff became what known as a Marmite game. Either you loved it or you hated it.
There isn't much to say about the sound, but the ball kicks are satisfying and feel authentic. The crowd noise, on the other hand, I found it way too loud and a bit piercing to the ear.
Ayrton Senna described kart racing as pure racing, and I would describe Kickoff as a pure football game.
A benefit of these games is that since you only have one button, the controls are so much easier to learn compared to something like FIFA on today's platforms.
The graphics are basic but work well, and I really like the simple animation of the ball.
No frills, just fast and furious gameplay, like a real football match. This is achieved with the blistering pace of the game and those simple sound effects that are actually so realistic.
Still, there are plenty of options with the limited controls. And it's nice that there's a practice option where you can perfect your skills. Corner kicks, passing, and scoring can be practiced to your heart's content. Overall, this is a quality game, a lot of fun to play, and I really enjoyed it.
I had some amazing games with friends, almost leading to punch-ups at times. Whilst the original Kick-Off now seems quite dated, it's certainly justified, in my opinion.
Overall, I was quite impressed with Kick-Off's straight-to-the-point arcade gameplay, and considering the '89 release and how well it still plays now with such a simple control setup, I'd say its classic football status is definitely justified.
As I mentioned earlier, Sensible Soccer took cues from Macrae Soccer, which makes a lot of sense.
Sensible Soccer is the complete opposite to Kick-Off in terms of frills, whereas Kick-Off is as plain and simple looking as you can get. Sensible Soccer had the sample title track, slick menu system, and detailed pitch graphics and sprites. It also boosted accurate player and team data from every national and club team in Europe.
Sensible is just a really fun game, plain and simple. The small but very detailed character sprites always reminded me a lot of Japanese-styled arcade games in look.
Again, we have a nice-looking top-down perspective, but the players here are much smaller, 12 pixels high to be exact.
No game had this level of detail at the time, and as a football nut, this was a real pull for me. I could play as AC Milan with all their Italian and Dutch stars at the time, like Ruud Gullit and Paolo Maldini.
The menus are extremely slick with tons of options and teams and leagues, and has a very cool bombastic intro song in typical Amiga style.
Due to the smaller nature of the players, you can see more of the playfield as a result. This is another plus in my opinion, and something that became obvious after comparing the two games.
Like everybody else said, yeah, having the further pullback viewpoint makes it a lot easier to judge the field distance and seeing your other players as opposed to Kick-Off's much more frantic nature.
I felt I had a much better feel for where the ball was at any given time, and the game just felt more fluid as a result.
I also prefer the pitch elevation and control method over Kick-Off. It gives you enough of a view of what's around you to be tactical and promoted individual playing styles to be developed.
The sound is absolutely perfect. I really love the constant crowd cheering. It really captures those Saturday afternoon football matches that you used to watch on TV back then.
In order to be successful, you must utilize your teammates, and I feel I had much more of an idea where my team was compared to Kick-Off.
Gameplay I feel is a little bit more slick than Kick-Off, but overall both games are detailed, tight, simple gameplay with lots of wiggle room for more nuanced style, if you were willing to put in the time, that is.
For example, I used to like passing the ball around before making an attack on goal, whereas my friend was much more direct and would try a long pass right down the middle. Controlling the ball was not as intricate as Kick-Off, but it didn't entirely stick to your feet either, so I felt that was spot on.
Like Kick-Off, the scrolling is smooth and looks great. Sound effects are minimal, but the crowd noises and whistles are more varied and definitely more pleasing. So, my verdict of these games. I was surprised how much I enjoyed playing these two titles. Even with a joystick and one single button, there is depth to the controls, but at the same time, a beginner can pick up the games and have some fun, and I definitely found I was improving the longer I played.
Sports games are generally not my jam, but arcadey style affairs are always good, no matter what the genre.
To this day, I still have loads of love for Sensible Soccer, and I still play the latest Amiga version with all its updated players for the current season. In fact, there's a whole community who play online competitions and keep it updated. I don't get the same feeling when I'm playing Kick-Off.
These are essentially arcade-style titles, with lots of fast action and requiring good hand-eye coordination. I think I would have been satisfied with either one had I purchased them back when they were released. They don't feel old, and a fun game is always a fun game, even years down the road.
Both these games are extremely well made and quite addictive, whether playing them now or back then. They definitely are both justified in their reputations.
I feel both are justified today, but I'll give a slight nod to Sensible Soccer. While I prefer the player animations of Kick-Off, the smaller sprites in Sensible Soccer provide a better experience in seeing more of the action, and it just overall felt easier on the eyes. But again, both games are of very high quality, and I don't think you can go wrong with either. 2 thumbs up for me.
So for me, whilst both games are justified, Sensible Soccer wins the day by a full length of the pitch. It's 100% justified.
My personal preference would, however, go to Sensible, which just manages to have more options and that extra bit of personality that Sensible Software always brought to their games.
And the verdict is justified. The court is now adjourned. All rise, and we'll see you again soon for the next case.